The Good Samaritan as radical inclusion. The road to Jericho, a world of wounds. The road to Jericho, a desolate scar etched across the Judean wilderness, a pathway known for its danger, its desperation, its stark reflection of our broken world. A traveler lies beaten, robbed, abandoned, a stark and brutal symbol of the wounds we inflict upon one another, a testament to the indifference that permeates our societies. The harsh sun beats down, mirroring the unforgiving nature of the world, casting long, distorted shadows that obscure the faces of those who pass by, shadows that symbolize the moral blindness that allows us to turn away from suffering. Ancient world imagery dissolves into the haunting realities of modern suffering. Refugee camps teeming with displaced souls, urban homeless encampments where human dignity is eroded, victims of natural disasters left without aid, their cries echoing in the silence of neglect. This isn't just a historical anecdote. It's a mirror reflecting our present, a challenge to our complacency. The powerful, the privileged, the comfortable avert their gaze, clinging to their self-constructed bubbles of safety, their carefully curated traditions, their carefully maintained illusions of superiority. But then, amidst the shadows of indifference, comes the unexpected hero, the unlikely savior, the Samaritan, an outsider, a pariah, a figure scorned, a symbol of those we marginalize, those we demonize, those we refuse to see. He dares to cross the lines we have drawn, the boundaries we have erected, the walls we have built. This isn't just a story of kindness, a simple act of charity. It's a seismic challenge to every wall we build, every us vs them mentality that divides humanity, every prejudice that blinds us to the inherent dignity of our fellow human beings. Can we truly see a neighbor in the face of our enemy? Can compassion transcend centuries of hate, generations of prejudice, millennia of division? Can we break free from the chains of indifference and embrace the radical love that Jesus calls us to? The setup of scorn. Jesus, the master storyteller, the divine disruptor, crafts this parable not to soothe our consciences, not to reinforce our comfortable assumptions, but to unsettle our hearts, to challenge our prejudices, to dismantle our self-righteousness. He answers a lawyer's question, "Who is my neighbor?" Not with theological doctrine, not with abstract principles, but with a gut-wrenching story, a raw and visceral narrative that blows up social norms, that shatters our carefully constructed moral hierarchies. The priest and the Levite, the pillars of the community, the guardians of tradition, the exemplars of piety, carefully, meticulously, deliberately walk by. Was it fear of ritual impurity, a self-serving adherence to rules over people, a calculated avoidance of inconvenience? The text doesn't judge. It doesn't offer excuses. It simply presents their resounding silence, their deafening indifference, their chilling complicity in the face of human suffering. Their silence speaks volumes, a testament to the ways in which we prioritize our comfort, our convenience, our self-interest over the needs of others, the ways in which we justify our inaction, rationalize our indifference, sanitize our complicity. The setting is crucial to understanding the shock value of the story. Priests and Levites, revered as spiritual leaders, are depicted adhering strictly to religious laws. Their ceremonial robes, adorned with intricate designs, signify their high status and commitment to purity. Yet, their unwavering adherence to these laws blinds them to the plight of the wounded man. They walk past, their gazes fixed forward, unwilling to risk defilement by touching a potentially dead body. Their silence is not just physical, it is a profound moral silence, an absence of compassion that echoes through the centuries. In this moment, Jesus exposes the hollowness of ritualistic purity. The priest and Levite, bound by their interpretation of the law, fail to embody its deepest truth. Love of neighbor is not just a command, it is the very heartbeat of the divine. Their resounding silence stands as an indictment against any practice of faith that prioritizes rules over people, doctrine over mercy. The Samaritan's reckless love. Enter the Samaritan, the other, the enemy, the religiously impure, the socially ostracized, the culturally despised. He's not a figure of power, not a symbol of authority, not a paragon of virtue, but one vulnerable traveler helping another, one wounded soul reaching out to another, one human being recognizing the shared humanity of another. What does he see that the others missed? Perhaps a shared humanity, a recognition of inherent dignity beyond tribe or belief, a glimpse of the divine image in the face of the wounded man. He doesn't just offer pity, a fleeting emotion, a superficial gesture. He expends resources, risks his own safety, and invests in the long-term care of a stranger, a member of a despised group. He becomes the embodied love that shatters every prejudice, the living embodiment of radical inclusion, the tangible manifestation of divine compassion. His actions are not merely acts of charity. They are acts of defiance, acts of resistance, acts of subversion, acts of love that challenge the very foundations of our social order, the very fabric of our moral universe. The Samaritan's actions are portrayed with a sense of reverence. His every movement is deliberate, conveying a deep sense of empathy and commitment. The oil and wine he uses to cleanse the wounds symbolize purification and healing, transcending mere first aid. As he bandages the wounds, his hands move with a gentleness that speaks of his profound respect for the human being before him. When he lifts the man onto his donkey, it is an act of sacrificial love, placing the stranger's needs above his own. The Samaritan's love is reckless, uncalculating, and profoundly self-giving. It is a love that breaks down barriers, that defies societal expectations, that sees in the face of the other a mirror of the divine. In this radical act of inclusion, Jesus calls us to a love that knows no bounds, a love that dares to see the image of God in every human being. As we watch the Samaritan approach the wounded man, the scene unfolds with a reverence for the sacredness of the moment. The Samaritan's steps are deliberate, each one a testament to his resolve to help. The slow mission shots capture the gravity of his actions, emphasizing the care and compassion in every movement. When the Samaritan cleanses the wounds with oil and wine, these elements symbolize not only physical healing, but also a deeper spiritual cleansing. The oil represents an anointing, a sanctification of the broken body before him. The wine, often a symbol of joy and celebration, is here used to purify, suggesting that even in the darkest of times there is hope for renewal. The Samaritan's actions are not merely acts of kindness, they are profound theological statements. In touching the wounded man, the Samaritan crosses the boundary of ritual purity, embracing the risk of defilement for the sake of compassion. This is a radical embodiment of the love that Jesus calls us to, a love that transcends legalistic boundaries and sees the divine image in every person. As the Samaritan carefully bandages the wounds, the act becomes a metaphor for the healing that can occur when we choose to see beyond our biases. The bandages, wrapped with precision and care, signify the mending of not only physical wounds, but also the social and spiritual wounds that divide humanity. In this moment, the Samaritan's love becomes a bridge that spans across centuries of enmity, prejudice, and fear. It is a love that invites us to move beyond our comfort zones, to recognize the inherent dignity in every person we encounter. It is a love that calls us to invest in the long-term care of our neighbors, to see their well-being as intertwined with our own. As the Samaritan lifts the wounded man onto his donkey, the weight of the action is palpable. It is a gesture of immense sacrifice, placing the needs of the stranger above his own. The donkey, a humble creature, becomes a symbol of the journey towards radical inclusion and compassion. The Samaritan's journey is not an easy one. It is fraught with danger, discomfort, and uncertainty. Yet, it is precisely this journey that Jesus calls us to undertake, to be willing to bear the burdens of others, to walk the difficult paths of empathy and solidarity, and to become vessels of God's boundless love in a world that so desperately needs healing. Levinas and the face of the other. Emmanuel Levinas, the great 20th century philosopher, the prophet of ethical responsibility, said ethics begins not with abstract principles, not with universal laws, but with the face, the vulnerable, exposed, demanding face of the other. The priest and Levite, categorized, labeled, dismissed. The Samaritan saw. He recognized the wounded man's inherent worth, his undeniable dignity, his irrefutable humanity, a demand for action that shattered indifference, a call to responsibility that transcended reason and plunged into the very core of our humanity. For Levinas, proximity creates infinite responsibility, an ethical imperative that knows no bounds, a call that transcends reason and dives into the very core of our humanity, a call to respond to the suffering of the other as if it were our own. The philosophy of Emmanuel Levinas offers profound insights into the nature of ethical responsibility. Levinas posits that true ethics begin with the face-to-face encounter with the other. In the story of the Good Samaritan, this encounter is vividly illustrated. As the camera focuses on the close-ups of the wounded man's face, we see not just a figure of suffering, but a reflection of our own humanity. The deep lines of pain, the eyes filled with despair, and the silent plea for help compel us to confront the reality of his existence. The face, according to Levinas, is not just a physical feature. It is a call, a demand for recognition and response. In the gaze of the Samaritan, we see the essence of Levinas's ethics. The face of the other is not an object to be categorized or dismissed. It is a revelation of our own ethical responsibility. The priest and the Levite saw only a body, a potential source of impurity. The Samaritan saw a fellow human being, a soul in need of compassion. This recognition shattered the indifference that binds us and opened the way to true ethical action. Levinas emphasizes that this encounter creates an infinite responsibility. The proximity to the other, the physical and emotional closeness, demands a response that goes beyond rational calculation. It is a call that touches the very core of our being, compelling us to act with compassion and selflessness. For Levinas, this ethical call transcends reason. It is not a matter of convenience or self-interest. It is a profound encounter with the divine image in the other. In recognizing the wounded man's worth, the Samaritan answers this call, diving into the very core of what it means to be human. It is a call that echoes through the ages, inviting us to see beyond the surface and to respond with boundless love and compassion. Kantian universality and the moral law. Immanuel Kant, the champion of reason, the architect of moral duty, asks, what if every human acted on the principle of unconditional love? That what we decide to do becomes a universal rule in our lives. This action will be so important it affects lives. What if the moral compass that guided the Samaritan, his unwavering commitment to compassion, his radical embrace of the other, became the foundation of all morality, the cornerstone of our ethical universe, the guiding principle of our social order? What if we treated people not as means to an end, not as objects of our pity, not as targets of our prejudice, but as ends in themselves, as beings of inherent worth, as reflections of the divine image? This goes beyond fleeting emotion, beyond sentimental gestures, beyond superficial acts of charity. It becomes a firm will to act for the betterment of humanity, a resolute commitment to justice, an unwavering dedication to compassion, a radical embrace of responsibility, a transformative force that shapes our character, defines our purpose, and redeems our world. Immanuel Kant asks, what if every human acted on the principle of unconditional love, that what we decide to do becomes a universal rule in our lives? This action will be so important it affects lives. What if the moral compass that guided the Samaritan became the foundation of all morality, of treating people how we want to be treated? This goes beyond fleeting emotion and becomes a firm will to act for the betterment of humanity, to take on responsibility. Expanded elaboration. Immanuel Kant's philosophical framework offers profound insights into the ethical implications of the Good Samaritan parable. At the heart of Kantian ethics is the categorical imperative, a universal moral law that commands us to act only according to principles that could be adopted universally. This idea resonates deeply with the actions of the Good Samaritan, who embodies a moral principle that transcends individual circumstances. Kant's categorical imperative challenges us to consider the broader implications of our actions. Imagine a world where every person acted with the same unconditional love and care as the Good Samaritan. What kind of society would we create? This principle calls us to treat others not as means to an end, but as ends in themselves, deserving of our respect and compassion. As the narration unfolds, the visuals showcase various scenarios where individuals embody the spirit of the Good Samaritan. We see scenes of people rushing to aid victims of natural disasters, offering shelter to refugees, and standing up against injustices. These modern examples highlight the timeless relevance of Kant's moral philosophy. Kantian ethics is not about fleeting emotions. It is about a steadfast commitment to doing what is right. The Good Samaritan's actions are guided by a deep moral conviction, a will to act for the betterment of humanity. This is the essence of Kant's moral law, to act in ways that contribute to the flourishing of all, recognizing our shared responsibility for the well-being of others. The scene delves deeper into the philosophical implications of the Samaritan's action. By treating the wounded man with dignity and care, the Samaritan exemplifies the principle of treating others as we would want to be treated. This golden rule, echoed in many religious and philosophical traditions, becomes the foundation of a universal ethic. Kant's vision invites us to imagine a world where our actions are guided by an unwavering moral compass. The Good Samaritan's love becomes a universal rule, a guiding light that shapes our interactions and decisions. It is a call to embrace responsibility, to act with integrity, and to build a more just and compassionate world. As the scene concludes, the visuals shift to a contemplative montage of serene landscapes and diverse communities living in harmony. The message is clear. The ethical teachings of Kant and the example of the Good Samaritan invite us to strive for a world where compassion and justice prevail. Musa Dube and Reclaiming the Narrative. Post-colonial readings, pioneered by scholars like Musa Dube, force us to confront the uncomfortable realities of power, the insidious nature of dominance, the enduring legacies of colonialism. They compel us to ask, whose perspective dominates this parable? Whose voices have been silenced? Whose experiences have been marginalized? Whose interpretations have been dismissed? For centuries, the West has told this story from a position of power, casting itself as the enlightened Samaritan, the benevolent savior, the bringer of aid to the less fortunate, the uncivilized, the undeveloped. But what if we center the voices of those wounded and marginalized by systemic injustice, those who have borne the brunt of oppression, those who have been relegated to the margins of history? What if we listen to the perspectives of those who have experienced the brutality of colonialism, the indignity of exploitation, the trauma of displacement? What if we allow their voices to reshape our understanding of this parable? Text quotes from Dube's work on decolonizing biblical hermeneutics, like sparks of truth, illuminate the necessity to listen to the other, to understand the perspectives of those who have been historically oppressed, to see the world through their eyes. In this scene, the narrative shifts to a critical examination of how the parable of the Good Samaritan has been interpreted through a Western lens. The visuals introduce us to African biblical scholars with a particular focus on Musa Dube, a leading voice in post-colonial biblical hermeneutics. Her work challenges the dominant interpretations and urges us to reconsider whose stories are being told and whose voices are being heard. Musa Dube's work invites us to decolonize our reading of the Bible. She asks us to consider how the parable of the Good Samaritan has been used to reinforce colonial mindsets, casting Western powers as the benevolent saviors and the rest of the world as the helpless victims. This perspective not only distorts the true message of the parable, but also perpetuates systemic injustice. The narration delves deeper into Dube's critique, emphasizing the need to center the voices of those who have been historically marginalized. The parable, when seen through a post-colonial lens, takes on new dimensions of meaning. Dube's post-colonial reading compels us to ask, what if the wounded man represents the colonized, oppressed by systems of power and left to suffer on the margins? What if the Samaritan is not a Western savior, but a symbol of indigenous resistance and solidarity? This perspective shifts the focus from a simplistic narrative of charity to a profound call for justice and liberation. Post-colonial theology challenges us to reframe the narrative, to see the wounded and marginalized not as passive recipients of aid, but as active agents of change. It invites us to recognize the ways in which systemic injustice continues to shape our world, and to join in the struggle for liberation and equity. The scene transitions to modern examples of how post-colonial readings can inspire action. We see images of communities mobilizing for social justice, indigenous leaders advocating for their rights, and movements that challenge the status quo. By centering the voices of the oppressed, we gain a fuller understanding of the parable's radical message. It is a call to dismantle the structures that perpetuate inequality and to build a world where every person's dignity is upheld. It is a call to listen, to learn, and to act in solidarity with those who have been left by the wayside, reinterpreting the wounded man through a post-colonial lens. Now we must look at the wounded man through a new lens, a lens that transcends the limitations of Western-centric interpretations. a lens that embraces the richness of diverse perspectives, a lens that acknowledges the complexities of power instead of only seeing a body needing mending, a victim of isolated misfortune. We need to view him as a symbol for those in the modern world most affected by systemic injustice, those who bear the scars of historical oppression, those who carry the wounds of ongoing exploitation. We see him as a symbol for the millions upon millions affected by the systemic issues we are facing today: war, hunger, greed, environmental devastation, the displacement of indigenous peoples, the exploitation of migrant workers, the systemic racism that permeates our institutions. He is the refugee fleeing violence, the indigenous person fighting for their land, the migrant worker exploited for their labor, the victim of climate change who has lost their home. He is the embodiment of the suffering inflicted by global systems of power, a living testament to the ongoing consequences of colonialism, a stark reminder of the urgent need for justice, the imperative to dismantle the structures that perpetuate inequality, the call to build a world where all are treated with dignity and respect. This scene invites us to engage deeply with the wounded man's plight, recognizing him as a representation of the many individuals and communities that suffer under systemic injustices. By reinterpreting the wounded man through a post-colonial lens, we acknowledge the broader socio-political and economic forces at play. The wounded man becomes a poignant symbol of the countless lives disrupted by the inequities of our global system. His suffering is not an isolated incident, but a reflection of the pervasive challenges faced by the marginalized and oppressed. This reinterpretation challenges us to broaden our understanding of compassion and justice. The narration continues to explore the interconnectedness of these issues, emphasizing how they are perpetuated by systemic structures of power and privilege. The wounded man serves as a mirror, reflecting the harsh realities faced by millions around the world. In seeing the wounded man as a symbol of systemic suffering, we are called to address the root causes of these injustices. It is not enough to offer temporary relief. We must work towards transformative change. This means dismantling the structures that perpetuate war, poverty, and exploitation. It means advocating for policies that promote equity, sustainability, and human dignity. Reinterpreting the wounded man through a post-colonial lens also requires us to listen to the voices of those who have been silenced. It is about centering the experiences and perspectives of those most affected by systemic injustice. Their stories, their resilience, and their wisdom are essential to creating a more just and inclusive world. The scene continues to showcase testimonies from individuals who have experienced systemic injustices firsthand. Their narratives provide a powerful counterpoint to the dominant perspectives that often overshadow their experiences. In their faces we see the face of the wounded man. In their voices we hear the call for justice and compassion. By listening, we become allies in their struggle, joining them in the fight for a better future. Through this post-colonial lens, the parable of the Good Samaritan becomes a call to action. It urges us to confront the systemic issues that wound our world and to stand in solidarity with those who suffer. It is a call to radical inclusion, to break down the barriers that divide us, and to work tirelessly for a world where every person is seen, heard, and valued. Case studies of modern compassion. The Good Samaritan isn't confined to the ancient world. He lives on in every act of radical inclusion, every defiant refusal to dehumanize the other. These are people not just motivated by pity, but by a profound sense of responsibility, a recognition that their well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of all. In this scene, we are introduced to modern-day Good Samaritans, individuals and organizations who embody the spirit of radical inclusion and compassion in their daily lives. Through their actions, they break down barriers, challenge prejudices, and create spaces where every person is valued and cared for. The Welcome Center movement is a beacon of hope for those seeking refuge. Volunteers come together, driven by a profound sense of responsibility to offer aid and support to migrants. Their actions are not just acts of charity, they are expressions of radical love that transcend borders and politics. The scene transitions to community activists creating safe spaces for LGBTQ+ youth. We see vibrant and inclusive environments where young people feel accepted and celebrated for who they are. The visuals highlight the joy and sense of belonging that these spaces provide. In creating safe spaces for LGBTQ+ youth, community activists are redefining what it means to be a neighbor. They are building communities grounded in acceptance, where every individual is seen and valued. Their work is a testament to the transformative power of radical inclusion. Next, we witness the courageous efforts of Doctors Without Borders workers in war zones. The camera follows them as they navigate dangerous environments, providing medical care to those in desperate need. The visuals convey the intensity and urgency of their mission. Doctors Without Borders embodies the essence of the Good Samaritan. Their commitment to providing medical aid in the most perilous conditions is a powerful act of selflessness. These healthcare workers risk their lives to ensure that no one is left behind, embodying the principle that our well-being is interconnected. The montage continues with scenes of community members organizing food drives. We see the collective effort to gather and distribute food to those in need. The visuals capture the warmth and solidarity of these communal endeavors. In organizing food drives, community members come together to address hunger and food insecurity. Their actions are rooted in a deep sense of responsibility for one another. They recognize that when one person is hungry, we all share the burden. By providing for their neighbors, they are living out the call to radical love. These modern-day Good Samaritans remind us that the parable's message is timeless. In every act of radical inclusion, in every defiant refusal to dehumanize the other, we see the embodiment of true compassion. These individuals and organizations are motivated not by pity, but by a recognition that their well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of all. Reflections on the ongoing effects of slavery at Harvard University with Dr. Karen King. Dr. Karen King, Enslavement and the Formation of Earliest Christianity, challenges us to examine the power structures within biblical narratives and address slavery and other forms of oppression. These conversations, even those that may be difficult, encourage understanding and action. This scene introduces a critical examination of the ongoing effects of slavery and its implications within biblical narratives. The conversation with Dr. Karen King serves as a focal point, highlighting the importance of addressing historical and contemporary injustices. Dr. Karen King's work invites us to confront uncomfortable truths about the foundations of our faith and society. By examining the role of enslavement in the formation of earliest Christianity, she sheds light on the ways in which power structures have been perpetuated and challenged throughout history. This critical reflection is essential for fostering a deeper understanding of our shared past and for paving the way towards justice and reconciliation. The narration delves into the complexities of Dr. King's research, emphasizing the need to re-examine biblical texts through the lens of social and historical contexts. This approach challenges us to rethink traditional interpretations and consider the lived experiences of those who were marginalized and oppressed. Dr. King's scholarship reveals how the early Christian community navigated issues of power and oppression. By exploring the intersection of slavery and early Christianity, She uncovers the ways in which the gospel message was both complicit in and subversive of the dominant power structures. This nuanced understanding calls us to engage with our faith in a way that is honest and transformative. Addressing the legacy of slavery requires us to confront the ongoing realities of systemic oppression in our world today. The wounds of the past continue to shape the present, manifesting in racial disparities, economic inequalities, and social injustices. It is our responsibility to engage in these difficult conversations and to take meaningful action towards healing and justice. The conversation with Dr. King highlights the importance of acknowledging and addressing these historical injustices within the context of our faith communities. Her insights challenge us to move beyond passive acceptance and towards active engagement with the issues at hand. Dr. King's work is a call to action for faith communities and individuals alike. It is an invitation to critically examine our own beliefs and practices, to recognize the ways in which they may perpetuate harm, and to commit to the work of reconciliation and justice. By doing so, we honor the true spirit of the gospel, which calls us to love and care for the least of these in our midst. These conversations, even those that may be difficult, encourage understanding and action. They compel us to examine the power structures within our own communities and to work towards a more just and inclusive future. In doing so, we embody the radical love and compassion of the Good Samaritan, breaking down barriers and building bridges of understanding and solidarity. Guided reflection. The road to Jericho, the path of human suffering, the journey of compassion, runs through each of our hearts. It is not a distant road, a historical relic, but a present reality, a daily choice, a constant invitation to disrupt our comfort, to challenge our biases, to embrace the radical love that Jesus embodies. Jesus is not simply telling a story, a moral fable, a historical anecdote. He is issuing a summons, a divine call, a personal invitation to each of us to become agents of healing, to become living embodiments of compassion, to become good Samaritans in our own time, in our own way, in our own sphere of influence. Let us pause, let us reflect, let us turn our gaze inward and confront the Jericho roads that lie within our own hearts. Who is your Samaritan? Whom have you been taught to fear or dismiss? Consider the individuals, the groups, the communities that you have been conditioned to see as other, as different, as threatening. Who are the people you have been taught to avoid, to distrust, to dehumanize? Are they the immigrants seeking refuge, the homeless individuals on the street, the members of a different political party, the people who hold different religious beliefs? Are they the ones you have judged based on appearances, based on stereotypes, based on the whispers of prejudice? Can you see their humanity, their vulnerability, their shared experience of suffering? Can you recognize the divine image in their faces? What road to Jericho have you been avoiding? What acts of compassion have you postponed? What acts of justice have you neglected? What opportunities for healing have you ignored? What are the difficult conversations you have avoided? The uncomfortable truths you have suppressed? The challenging relationships you have neglected? What are the systemic issues that you have chosen to ignore? The injustices that you have chosen to overlook? The suffering that you have chosen to What resources, time, money, privilege can you invest in radical love? What are the tangible ways in which you can embody the compassion of the Good Samaritan? Can you donate your time to volunteer at a local shelter, your money to support organizations working for social justice, your privilege to amplify the voices of the marginalized? Can you use your skills, your talents, your influence to advocate for change, to build bridges of understanding, to create a more just and compassionate world? What inner prejudices or assumptions need to be challenged? What are the hidden biases, the unconscious attitudes, the ingrained prejudices that shape your perceptions, influence your actions, and limit your capacity for compassion? What are the walls you have built within your own heart, the barriers you have erected in your own mind, the divisions you have fostered in your own soul? What are the ways in which you have allowed fear, prejudice, and self-interest to cloud your judgment, to harden your heart, to blind you to the needs of others? The road to Jericho is a journey of transformation, a process of healing, a path to liberation. It is a call to disrupt our comfort, to cross the lines that divide, to become, in our time and in our way, Good Samaritans for a world desperately in need of healing. To deepen your understanding, to expand your horizons, to enrich your spiritual journey, we encourage you to explore the resources available at Harvard Divinity School, particularly the work of Dr. Karen King, whose scholarship challenges us to confront the uncomfortable truths of our history and to engage with the ethical dimensions of our faith. Focus on the ethical applications of these ideas to modern life, to the challenges we face in our communities, in our nation, in our world. How do we create a more just and loving world? A world where the dignity of every human being is respected, where the needs of the vulnerable are met, where the wounds of the past are healed. How do we follow Jesus' example today in our daily lives, in our interactions with others, in our engagement with the world? How do we become Good Samaritans in a world that desperately needs healing, in a world that desperately needs love? This is our call, to go and do likewise, to embody the love and compassion of the Good Samaritan in our everyday lives, to break down the barriers that divide us, and to build a world where every person is seen, heard, and valued. Let us walk this road together with courage and hope towards a future filled with radical inclusion and healing. Thank you for joining us on this transformative journey into the heart of the Good Samaritan's timeless message. As we've explored how ancient wisdom meets modern challenges, we invite you to reflect. Who is the Samaritan in your world? If this dive into radical inclusion and unwavering love has stirred something within you, we warmly welcome you to become part of our Hope in God community. Subscribe for more inspiring theological reflections. Share your personal experiences of grace and transformation, and let's continue our shared pilgrimage towards a deeper understanding of God's boundless love. Together, we can build a world where every act of compassion lights the way forward.